Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the Marvel Universe comes a series of highly imaginative tales featuring some of comic books' most iconic characters of all time, transplanted from their usual storylines and thrust into a reality in which they do not belong. We're talking about Marvel's What If. What If was a series of books published by Marvel Comics. The series debuted in February of 1977 and featured one-off issues depicting characters plucked from their usual storylines and put into alternate scenarios. The series featured Uatu the Watcher, an interplanetary narrator who observed the happenings on Earth from his base on the moon. With each issue, the Watcher presented a storyline that was familiar to the readers, but then took the storyline into a different direction following a certain point of divergence. The Watcher didn't interfere with the events playing out before him, as he was meant only to observe. These alternate realities became the driving narrative behind the series, including the first issue's What If Spider-Man Had Joined the Fantastic Four? That issue was followed by other stories which posed similar questions, including what if the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner? What if the Avengers had never been? And what if the Invaders stayed together after World War I? And many others. Similar to DC Comics' Elseworlds, the What If series often operated independently of regular comic book continuity. The series often took the characters in wildly different directions, with the endings to the books being much darker than originally written. The first volume of the series ran from 1977 to 1984, followed by the second volume from 1989 to 1998, and subsequent volumes following in the years after. The What If series was a hit with comic book fans around the world and remains popular with readers today. The What If concept has now been adapted to a brand new animated series, which is set to debut on the Disney Plus streaming service in mid-2021. The new series will feature voice work from many of the actors featured in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, including Tom Hiddleston as Loki, Josh Brolin as Thanos, and Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Haley Atwell will reprise her role as Agent Peggy Carter in the first episode, in which she takes the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers. Anticipation of the new animated series is high among comic book fans, who are anxious to hear their favorite Marvel actors back in the mix, as well as see the world of What If brought back to life in a brand new medium. And that's the lowdown on Marvel's What If. It's not often that we jump right in on something that's currently going. It's not that we haven't done it here on the show, but it's just not something that we make a habit of. No real reason for that other than maybe the thought of let's do some evergreen stuff so we can release it anytime we want to, that kind of thing. Truth be told, that's really the reason. We have done some time-sensitive stuff that we will record and then have to get out like by the next week because it's making the rounds, it's in the headlines, and I'm like, I want to get this episode out as quick as possible. Have done that before. But what led to this episode was not only because Marvel is one of the 6 M's, hello, of course, obviously, and yours truly is a huge Marvel fan. Always have been, always will be. But Marvel, the other day online, went nuts and dropped a whole bunch of stuff. Teasers, trailers, little quick spots, some artwork, some quick here you go kind of thing. And man, talk about whetting your appetite for what's to come on the Disney Plus service. Of course, Disney, parent company of Marvel, all that good stuff. So if you're a Marvel kid out there, man, have I got good news for you. Everything you could ever hope to get from the House of Ideas is coming your way, if it's not already there, on the Disney Plus. So Phil, you and I are recording, and as soon as we were done, you and I are both kind of scrolling online, and you start finding this stuff. You're like, oh my God, look at this. And I'm like, that's it. Get off the phone. I got to go look now because I spent like the rest of the night looking this stuff up. And I'm showing my other half, and she doesn't care. I'm just saying, she humors me, right? Because she's been to see a lot of the Marvel. She'll go see the Marvel films with me. It's not that she's not entertained by them. She is. And she knows enough to carry on conversations for sure. But, you know, it's Disney Plus. You're on the couch. Who cares? I do. I mean, dude, really, I freaking do. But to get her to care, that's another story. So one of the things that they highlighted amongst the many things they highlighted was the What If series. I don't know if I knew what to expect from this because I was a big fan of the comics growing up as a kid. Um, what's your relationship with the What If series? Is it new to you? Have you always kind of been aware of it? Have you followed it before? Like, what's that? What does that look like for you?
Um, I know a bits and pieces about the What If series. I started collecting kind of later, and I say collecting very loosely, like I would just collect comics that I was interested in. Um, but it's just kind of a thing where you could just look at stories that might have happened. It's kind of like what fans know as like fanfic, but it's like officially written by somebody written a writer at Marvel or whatever other comics. But it's really a Marvel thing because I don't think they have What If at DC, right?
They don't. No. And I was going to touch on that in this episode too, because DC has the Elseworlds thing, and I kind of always attributed that to sort of being their what if. It's not identical, but that's kind of, in my mind, it's kind of been the same thing, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, cause I mean, I know they have graphic novels and stuff that are like Elseworld, but they don't have like an official brand that is What If.
Yeah, I don't think DC really has something like that. Like I said, they do the Elseworld stuff, and it kind of gives you a glimpse of it. To be honest with you, man, I didn't realize until I started doing a little bit of research for this show that a lot of the what if stuff, I don't know if it was done at the time or if it was like a retroactive kind of thing, but they went back and said that the what if stuff is happening on alternate Earths, like
Hmm.
different timelines, different. And I didn't know that. I thought what if was just what if. And I'm not going to say that kills it for me, but maybe it kind of kills it for me because I don't know. I guess it's interesting to think about, hey, what if this guy had done this over here with these guys instead of doing it to this other guy? And then the thought of, well, maybe that universe, that planet exists somewhere, but nah, I don't know. I think a lot of this, the appeal of it for me was as a kid, was these are stories that never happened. This is a flight of fancy. This is like an exploration into the unknown, right? It's just something different, different taste of something. I mean, the what if books, it really intrigued me as a kid. It blew my mind. A lot of this stuff did. As we know, the actual book began in 1977, and I was a fan very, very early on. And I think the title is just what caught me because when you see what if, you're like, okay, what's this mean? And then you kind of do a little dive and explore from that point on. Like issue number one is what if Spider Man had joined the Fantastic Four, which is an excellent read, by the way. And a lot of the stuff that's very funny to me, whether it's intentional or not, a lot of the stuff that they've done in the What If series over the years has actually come to pass. And I often wonder, is it inspired by the What If series? Were they going to do it anyway? Like, is it chicken and egg situation? Because we've seen Spider Man work with the Fantastic Four, I mean, numerous times over the years. And like issue two, what if the Hulk had the brain of Bruce Banner? Well, that's happened. So, dude, it's kind of like, and I know you and I compare a lot of stuff to pro wrestling because that's a lot of our frame of reference sometimes. It's kind of like the idea of dream matches. At some point, the idea of the dream match didn't really mean anything anymore because there was just one company left. Like, WWE was it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, after a period of time, it's like, do the what if books even matter? Because they've done so much and they've explored so many possibilities. And I don't know. I just wonder when the novelty of it kind of wore off. When you said you came to it later, what was some of the what if books that started catching your eye that you started picking up?
Uh, yeah. Off the top of my head, there's stuff like it's usually like based around because miniseries became such a big thing. They would do all of the crossovers between like Secret Invasion or Civil War, and a lot of what ifs that I saw were connected to those things. And I think part of the thing with what if, like you said, that they're on their own universe now. I wonder, like, because everything is in this era where everything has to be like connected or there had to be synergy with everything. I wonder did they do that just in case, like, if we do these big multiverse stories, can we go and bring this Spider-Man from this multiverse and use him in this comic, or can we bring this Hulk from Bullet Points and use him here? Like I don't know if Bullet Points is technically a what if, but still, it's just like just the fact that you can connect all of these stories and use them in a crossover if you want.
Does that stuff matter to you? Like like you spoke about connecting everything, the interconnectivity of these universes. Is that a big thing for you, or does it matter
Not,
to you in the end?
not really. That seems like more of a company thing, you
Mm.
know. That way that they can come back and, you know, dot their I's and cross their T's later if they want to do something. Um, it's kind of like once Nick Fury became black in the movies, they made Nick Fury Jr. in the comics, and they got rid of regular Nick Fury.
Right. Suddenly, Nick Fury is Sam Jackson everywhere. So,
Right.
'cause I think it was, I mean, obviously it was Bendis, right? But,
They brought Nick Fury Jr.
oh, no, not Junior, but by originally made Nick Fury look like Sam Jackson in the Ultimate Universe.
I think that was Mark Millar because I think that was from the,
Maybe it
the
was.
Ultimates
Maybe it
comics.
was. I was thinking it was Bendis for some reason, but I remember whoever it was at the time, basically when he was asked about it, said, "Well, why can't Nick Fury look like Sam Jackson? What's the bit like? Why not?" Like, and at the time, everybody's like, "Yeah, why can't he look like Sam Jackson?" It was more or
Yeah,
less like, "That's a great idea." Next thing you know, Sam Jackson loves it and he's on board, and boom, you get the Marvel Universe, and awesome. So, yeah,
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Mark Millar because I think Bendis wrote Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men,
I
and
think
I
you're right.
think Nick Fury was introduced in the Ultimates.
That makes sense. I think I've got the first few issues of that. The Ultimate Universe is that's a great idea for podcast, by the way. We might actually do that one of these days. But the Ultimate Universe, it kind of threw me for a loop at the beginning because I'm an old school comic book guy,
Yeah,
and the idea of we're gonna change everything, I'm like, that's a DC move, man. That's a, you know what I mean? Like burn it all down, but rebuild it. I'm like, I don't know. So I didn't give it the time it deserved. I need to actually go back and check out some of the collected volumes and really um, get educated on it because I know I've missed a lot of good reading. So I do need to give it a chance. The what if stuff, for me, I don't know if it has to fit everything. I don't know if it has to lead somewhere. I think there's a certain charm in, hey, I had this idea. I wanted to see, what it would look like if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers. If someone besides Spider-Man had been bitten by the radioactive spider, which is a very interesting story. What if the world knew Daredevil was blind? Hey, I'll write that. I like Daredevil. I'll do it. And then you do it. You put your heart and soul into it, and then you're done. And the artist does his thing or her thing, and you're done. You're all good, and you move on to the next book. And so it's sort of an isolated, stand on its own kind of thing. And the thing about a lot of those what if books, man, to me, because I read a lot of them over the years, there was this feeling at the end like, well, that's it. I'm never going to go back to this again. This was just one story for one time and it never happened. And a lot of times those books didn't have good endings, if I'm being honest, because usually somebody died. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of, it's like, no wonder this didn't happen because this is an awful ending, man. You know?
yeah, definitely. Because I got that. Like, I don't know if you remember Bullet Points. I keep thinking of Bullet Points because it's one of those that I remember. I really think about a lot. And I think Bullet Points was written by Mark Millar again. And I'm pretty sure, like, the premise was, okay, what if Peter Parker didn't become Spider-Man? What if he became the Hulk instead?
Ooh.
And what if this person became Spider-Man? Or what if this person became Doctor Strange? And like all of these things have their, like, they're interesting, but it's like, oh, this is like terrible though. Like it would be bad for both characters. Like, this is he became Spider Man for a reason, or he became this person for a reason. It's just kind of like that's kind of how it felt to me.
That's an interesting point, man. Like, yeah, there's a reason why the Spider-Man books sold and made so much money, and he became a household name, and his face is recognized. I mean, we talked before about like the here on the show about the Superman symbol, probably being more than likely being a universally recognized thing. You could probably show that on a different continent. You could probably show that in a third world country, and chances are there would be a familiarity there to it. like, oh, I know what that is. That's Superman. I don't know if Spider-Man's face is close to that, but I would not be surprised if it was, because he's been so universally accepted and recognized. And yeah, that's a good point, man. Like, there's a reason why these books sold so many, why these characters are so beloved over the years, because it's a lot of history there. They were done the right way. They connect with people. And then when you turn it on its head and try something different, even if it is just for a what if one shot, it's like, that was kind of fun to read, but yeah, it's not working. So in that way, I think this is one of the more interesting, intriguing, and sort of odd things that Marvel does, as a company. It's very much different. What if Captain America had been selected president? I'm gonna be honest with you, I could totally get behind that. So
Yeah.
things like that, there is some thread of logic there, like that. I could totally understand. I could totally see that if it had happened. Um, what if Daredevil became an agent of Shield? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know. I've never read that one. That'd be interesting to see. But yeah, man, like I said, the endings to a lot of these things weren't great. Uh, what was the favorite? Well, like, what was your favorite one that you read? Is I know the one you've been talking. What you said, bullet points, right? So, is that the one that keeps jumping out to you?
Yeah, and see, technically it's not a what if because it's not under the brand what if, but it's kind
Right.
of like what DC does in like elsewhere comics. And I'm wrong. I said Millar. I think it's written by Straczynski.
I
Um,
think you're right.
I think it's yeah. So, but yeah, it's kind of like if Iron Man wasn't Tony Stark, it was Steve Rogers instead. And what if Hulk was Peter Parker? What if Bruce Banner was Spider Man? Um, it's interesting because I mean, it touches on a lot of things like what do we know about Peter Parker and what do we know about him having all of these unresolved issues as a teenager and maybe having this pent up anger that maybe would have made him an interesting Hulk. But at the same time, like you said, it ends horribly, and I think he ends up dying at the end of the series. So like, it's it's interesting. Like they're always interesting stories, but then it's kind of like, yeah, this person became who he became for a reason. Um, yeah, I'm just trying um to remember off the top of my head. I think the Super Soldier program didn't exist the way that it did in the regular universe, and that's why Steve ended up becoming Iron Man instead of Captain America. Um, I think instead of Project Super Serum, it was Project Iron Man. I think that's how it happened.
Interesting. I got man. I want to look that up now. That sounds cool.
Yeah.
So, whatever kind of reminds me of is DC. But again, I go back to the Elseworld stuff, but it really reminds me of that. And I really didn't make that connection until now, to be honest with you. But uh, the idea of Kal-El's ship landing in Russia
Yes.
instead of landing in Kansas or landing in Harlem or landing anywhere. It's the idea of, well, let's take this little baby and let's just put him somewhere else. And then I mean, my God, DC's done that stuff for years, man, for years. I'm like, it's Superman. He works for a reason. Leave him alone. Why you keep changing this all the time? Like, I would almost rather see them do a what if instead of, let's just take the big three and just change them every 6 months. We change them. Like, why? That stuff makes me crazy, man. Speaking of Red Sun, it's off topic. What did you think of Red Sun? Have you read it? Have you seen it?
I've I don't think I've ever read the whole thing. But I think it's just such an interesting idea. Um, I really like the idea of how does your environment and where you grow up change things? How much
Mm,
of it is nature and how much of it is nurture. And
right.
and I think that's a very interesting idea of what would Superman be like if he wasn't groomed in kind of this American way of living.
Mm.
And I keep saying I'm gonna read it, but I still haven't read it.
It's excellent. It's really good. The animated special on it's really good too. It's trading places,
Yeah.
right? It's trading places. It's the idea of they make the brothers make the bet and say, well, Bill Ray Valentine would have been, he's a criminal. It's like, no, he's not. He's product of his environment. No, he's not. He's part of his environment now. No, he's once a criminal, always a criminal. Nah, I'll prove you wrong. So they make the bet, and it's like he did change. He did become a better person. He did get responsibility. He did, want to change his life for the better. So his environment did make a huge impact in his life. So like it's a comedy, right? But every time I think about stories like that, I'm like, it's the trading places bet. That's what it is.
Yeah,
It's good stuff.
Trading Places is one of those movies that, like, I feel like there's lines from it that you can throw into a lot of things.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I've seen that movie countless times, and I love it so much. So yeah, it's just that idea of all right. Here's a, and on a more serious note, to the criminal aspect of it, if you really want to dive deep on something like that, the question is, the worst criminal that you've heard about or read. What if his environment had been different when he was growing up? What if he had been the product of a loving family instead of a family that didn't care whether he was alive or dead? What if this hadn't happened to him? What if this had happened to him? So I guess really in a lot of ways, everybody kind of does what if in just basic conversation. Not
Yeah.
just in terms of a comic book, but dude, I do that stuff all the time, man. Don't you?
Oh, of course. I mean, one of the things I came to understand more and more as I grew up, that desperation changes everything. When
Mhm.
someone's desperate, they'll do things that they wouldn't do if they're comfortable. And I think that's one of the themes of Trading Places in some ways, that, if you're desperate and you don't have anything, it's totally different from when you're comfortable and you're privileged.
Yeah, everything changes. You're looking for a way out, looking to yeah, to improve things. And like you said, desperation is can make you do crazy stuff, man. I've seen it firsthand. I'm sure we all have seen it in some form or fashion. Um, these books are supposed to be entertaining. Not for nothing, kids, but these things were uh, they're all. I mean, Marvel's always been more serious in tone. In terms of setting the books in the real world. It's a New York that you could recognize. There's actual landmarks in the Marvel books dating back to the very beginning. It's just how they roll. And I've always appreciated that about them. So there's always been sort of a different tone. DC's more of a fantasy world, and Marvel has always felt more real to me, which has always been one of the drawing points of that universe, still is today. So, but honestly, comics are supposed to be fun. But I'm telling you, man, I go back and look at some of these what ifs, and I'm like, man, there's not a lot of fun here. It's weird to see another guy in the costume, to see someone else doing something. What if Wolverine had killed the Hulk? Like, that's pretty good. That's pretty big. Stuff like that. I mean, you see that all the time in these big comic book fights where like it just looks like one guy's on the way out and suddenly he comes back, and it's like pro wrestling. There's the comeback at the end, and or it's like every hero has to fight each other when they don't know each other in the beginning because they just assume the other guy's a bad guy. So, and then finally toward the end of the fight, wait a minute, we're on the same side. Let's stop trying to kill each other. So,
Right,
I don't
which is
know.
pretty much the premise of What If. I mean, Civil War.
Yeah, very true. Very true. A lot of fundamental differences between Cap and Iron Man, obviously. Civil War could have been a what if. And I'm sure going back through some of these titles, man, I'm sure at some point there probably was some seeds planted, maybe at some point, of what if Iron Man and Captain America had been on different sides. I mean, I'd like, dude, that's Civil War for sure. That's the whole plot, man, is, fundamental differences in viewpoint and end goals and how you look at the world and all that stuff, not just from the book, but the movie as well. Um, so the series, and we can float back to the comics here, but what stood out to you in the trailer for the What If series on Disney Plus?
Oh, man, there's so many interesting things there that they threw out there. I mean, of course, the big one for me was, what if T'Challa is Star Lord? So what
That's
if
good
he's
stuff.
not the king of Wakanda, and what if he goes out and he like goes and sees the world outside of his world? Because that's a big thing about T'Challa when we initially meet him in the in the movies at least, is that he doesn't know that much outside of Wakanda. And we already know that he has like kind of this worldly way of being and he's already intellectual. But getting to take this kid out of Wakanda and showing him the universe right away, like that's an interesting idea to me.
It's awesome. I just I love it. The idea that that he was taken instead of it being Peter Quill. And I can't recall for the life of me where Peter Quill was when the Ravagers showed up. When Yondu and the Ravagers showed up, or what? I mean, I can't remember what city or what state that it was, but somehow they go to Wakanda instead. Um, and I guess it depends on how deep they go with this. So, does that mean that T'Challa's father, is Ego? Like, wonder how deep they're going to dive with this.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Like I don't know. That is interesting because it like does he still have the same connections and does he have still like technically the same um cosmic powers that we find out that Peter has later in the movies? Yeah, that I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, it just makes me wonder: are they going to stick to the films? Are they going to go to the comics? Are they going to go a little half and half? I mean, um, one of the things for me is, and by the way, I just love the idea of the original voice actors being included. Michael Rooker is in this show. They've got a lot of the original cast members from the movies involved in this series, which is freaking awesome. I fangirl pretty hard over here in Michael Rooker's voice. I can't help myself because I just love that guy to death. So I love the idea of T'Challa becoming Star Lord. It's a different character then because I don't know if I can imagine Star Lord or T'Challa Star Lord dancing around to an old '70s song.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I can imagine that or not. It's fun, but I don't. Is that his personality? Is he whimsical? Is he funny? Is he? It's a different guy, man.
yeah, because a good chunk of what Star Lord represents in the movies is like American nostalgia, and T'Challa has no connection to that. So it's
Very true.
like I don't know what does he bring to the character that's totally different. I mean, and of course this is Wakanda as a boy, so this is before he took the heart shape herb. This is before any of that. This is before he learned anything about being king or any of that.
Very true. Yeah. So his formative years are going to be spent with the Ravagers in space. So that's crazy. And plus, it makes you also wonder: how deep are they going to go? Is his mother going to be on her deathbed? Are they going to even worry about that, or is it just going to be the Ravagers just showed up? Because they got to have a reason to take this kid. I mean, you find out in Guardians that they're not the best guys. They're criminals. They're thugs. They're thieves. They're all this stuff, but they're not just cold blooded, heartless killers for no good reason. I mean, they take jobs. So the job was go get this kid off Terra and bring the kid back. So why in the world would they? Man, the fact is, we just got to watch it. I can't wait till it comes out. So that's going to
Yeah,
be
it
awesome.
looks really cool.
What about Peggy Carter as Captain Britain instead of Captain America?
Oh man, I'm really excited about that. Like I don't know about you, but I was a big fan of the Agent Carter TV show.
Yes,
And so really I'm really looking forward to them doing some more with that character. And I felt like she had a lot of untapped potential that we didn't get to see because the show got canceled. And I kept hoping that they would bring her back and do something else other than that. But maybe they will later after this. I don't know.
I would love to see that show get a second chance, at least on Disney Plus. I'd love it because I'm like you. I was totally into it, and my cheese meter is up pretty high for anything comic book related because Marvel has a great track record, but I'm always waiting. I'm thinking, oh wait, it's adapted to TV. Ooh, let's see. So I started watching Peggy Carter, Agent Carter, like from the very beginning. And I'm like, this is good. I really dig this. So I had no reason to be thinking that they were going to get this wrong. I thought it was really good. And it's funny because we see Jarvis and Peggy both in Endgame. And it's funny because when the scene pops up with Jarvis, I'm in a crowded theater. I'm looking around. I'm like, dude, it's Jarvis. This is awesome. And I was there with a friend of mine. And no one, I didn't have that moment of theater going, that's Jarvis, dude. This is cool. So I kept thinking, have any of you people, do you even watch Agent Carter? Maybe that was the problem, right? It wasn't getting enough ratings to begin with.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. But now that I think about it, that's another callback because isn't Steve Iron Man in the in that What If?
I think you're right, actually, because he does not, yeah, to your point, he doesn't get the super soldier serum, but she does. Yeah, it's a very fast clip. And honestly, the thing starts, all right, so let's talk about the trailer. The trailer's pretty freaking cool. The trailer starts with a shield. They find Cap's shield, and it's Cap's shield. It's not her shield. And, we see Star-Lord first, and we don't know at the beginning it's T'Challa. Um, and we see Nick Fury. Nick Fury looks like Nick Fury, so that doesn't look like it's changed. And then basically we hear, what if these guys were different and everything? We see Tony Stark as Iron Man, so that looks fine. At least I assume that's Tony Stark on the roof of the diner. But yeah, so talking about Steve becoming possibly Iron Man, I'm coming up on that bit here. We do see there's Peggy as Captain Britain. If you haven't seen this trailer, kids, you got to see it. It's really, really great. It's phenomenal. The animation of this stuff is excellent too. They did a great job with this. But we see that Tony Stark becomes the Sorcerer Supreme and not Stephen Strange.
Hmm.
Did you pick up on that?
Yeah, I noticed that. And I was wondering, does that mean because they have that fight at the end? Like, does that mean like Strange is like Mordo or?
Good question. Great question, actually. Yeah,
Well, I guess not Mordo, but he's the antagonist in the same way that Mordo would have been.
maybe so.
But yeah, the like we see Peggy riding on Iron Man at one point in
Yes,
the
and he's
trailer,
huge.
and I have to assume that has to be Steve in a suit because Tony's not alive at that point.
Very true.
Um,
It could be Howard Stark, supposedly. Maybe I don't know.
yeah, maybe so. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting dichotomy of making Steve Iron Man for several reasons because he never becomes what we know him to be. I mean, Steve is always a hero regardless. Like he doesn't need the serum to be a hero. That's
Right.
always been his story. Um, but just thinking of just skinny Steve in this big imposing Iron Man suit is an interesting idea.
Yeah, because I mean that suit is huge. It looks like the Iron Giant in this clip, man. Like, I mean, it's compared to her, it's massive. It's almost like Warmonger is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's very different. And honestly, I think the bit with Stark and Strange gets lost in the trailer because they look so similar to each other. You know what I mean? Like, I can't say that I got it to begin with. I had to go back and watch it again and say, wait a minute, that's Doctor Strange, but what are they saying is different here? And then it occurred to me, wait a minute, is that Tony? And then I had to read up on it after that. I'm like, wait, that is Tony. We see a female Hawkeye, which is different. We see a collector who may not be the collector that we all know, but I'm not sure who he is. We see a Captain Marvel who looks, I mean, she's blonde, but I don't know. I'm guessing that's not her, but I don't know that they've explained who that's supposed to be yet.
Yeah, this is our first time seeing Uatu, and I we've seen Uatu in the movies very briefly,
Hmm.
but this is the first time he's like really called himself the Watcher,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think we just see him make that cameo with Stan. And what movie is that? I think it's Guardians 2.
I think so because he's telling them all the stuff he had done and they're all turning to walk off. It's like, oh, where you going? Oh, geez. Like they're all leaving him there. He's got this terrible spacesuit on because I guess he's been sitting there telling them stories. Yeah, this is good stuff, man. And Uatu in the series is Jeffrey Wright doing the voice.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a nice touch. Excellent for that part for sure. Yeah, dude, that's something we haven't touched on yet. Talk to me about the idea of And we're talking about like I didn't realize that it was alternate Earths and multiverse and all this other stuff. But looking back on it now, Uatu is basically saying, I'm seeing glimpses, I'm seeing things that you wouldn't recognize, but that I see happen in front of me. I don't know if they ever clearly defined it then either and said, well, this is stuff that's really happening. It just always seemed like I'm seeing possibilities. That's kind of what it felt like. But what about the idea of the Watcher being this character who's completely he doesn't interfere. He just observes. He can't change anything. He won't help anyone. He's watching just as many deaths as he's watching births. I mean, obviously, cataclysms, devastations, everything you can imagine, and he does nothing. I mean, that's uh, it's pretty heavy for a Marvel comic, especially growing up as a kid reading that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess we suppose like I never really thought about it that way until I got older. That he sees everything. He sees every catastrophe as well. I just growing up reading it, I was just like, oh well, he sees everything. Like of course how kids think. We don't think about things going bad. We never look at the we never look at the dark side of things until we get older and see, oh yeah, this is kind of moody and dark.
Right? Yeah, yeah. You don't think about that stuff till you get to be a much older and jaded by life, by the world around you, right? Um, I don't know. I'm sort of, and it's not a new concept. I don't know that Marvel took it from anyone, but I know it's been done a lot since then. It was done in the Highlander TV series, where there were I forget what they call them, but there were guys that each Highlander had someone watching them, observing from a distance who didn't interfere, but it was up to that person to just record the events, and keep track of everything going on. So that was revealed. It wasn't evident from the first. I don't think season one. I think it may have been two or three, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I like the idea of it. Like I said, it seems a bit heavy for comics during that time, but he is as near and dear to the hearts of Marvel Comics readers, like longtime Marvel Comics readers, as any other character is, because he looks different. He's obviously an alien race. He's obviously, I guess they're omnipotent. I suppose the Watchers are. And yeah, man, just sitting back and watching this, well, watching for lack of a better term, watching this stuff happen. Something I'm watching happening because I'm watching the trailer a few times here to try to pick things up. What about zombie Captain America?
Yeah, I wonder where they're going with that because of course we see the shield later.
Yes, that's
Um,
right. Yeah.
I mean we see the shield, and so I'm assuming they dig up Cap, and he ends up like this. But I'm wondering what makes him like that because we know the serum like has preserved his life in some ways. Um, yeah, I'm wondering what is it that makes him a zombie. It has to be something connected to serum though.
That's a great point, man. Like maybe it's the serum that's bringing him back to life. Like, no matter what, you can't kill Wolverine. Like, I don't know what
Yeah.
they're doing now. I'm not following it now, but I know the age old conversation that I've had with friends since I was but a wee lad has always been, well, you can't kill Wolverine. Well, yo, what about this? And then we try to shoot down the idea. And basically, what we came up with was if you could find a way to remove his head from his body, then could Wolverine grow a new head? It's what then it becomes. Wait a minute, why couldn't he grow a new head? Well, the brain's gone. Yeah, but doesn't his body heal itself? I mean, obviously the brain. So it's like, well, the body heals itself. That means you can't kill him. Well, yeah, but what if you like cut him into all these pieces and buried him all over the planet? Well, then eventually one of those would each piece regenerate into a new Wolverine. Oh, that's a good one. Like, that's a whole other podcast, man.
Yeah, I think the canon is he could be killed by drowning him or decapitating him.
Drowning is so lame.
I think the drowning thing is I think if you can't I think it all ties back to brain function. So if you can't breathe, your brain can't function.
Right.
And same thing if you get decapitated, your brain doesn't function and it doesn't tell the rest of your body to regenerate.
Right, because yeah, I guess that makes sense. The firing has to come from somewhere. Something has to be firing in order to get you going again.
Yeah.
I still think drowning's lame. I don't know.
Like what like Unbreakable. Like he
Like
was
Unbreakable, yeah. Yeah, it's his only weakness. Forget kryptonite. Dude can't. Hey,
well,
listen, I can't swim. Water's my kryptonite too. I can relate, dude. You throw me in where my feet can't touch the bottom, I'm a dead man. And they could tell you all day, listen, Tommy, just relax, you just tread water. Really? No, I'm dead. I'm sinking. Yeah, dude, it's a control thing with me. I have to feel like I'm in control. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, dude, that's interesting. The idea that the super soldier serum didn't keep him alive, didn't preserve his body in the ice, but when they thawed him out, he's still alive because of the serum. I don't know what they could come up with or what they've come up with, but that's pretty darn good. I don't know of anything else they could do to explain that. Did you get into the big Marvel zombie craze when it first hit?
I read some of it, but I wasn't big into it. No, but I mean, once it blew up, because it started as a variant, right?
Right.
And then it just turned into like a full blown crossover, and it was everywhere. Like there's like two sequels to it, I think.
I think you're right. I did read I read something. I've got something, but I can't remember. I can't even tell you what it is. Spider-Man is the zombie, and like he's the head of, I guess, like a zombie clan or something. I don't know. I got to refresh my memory on that. But it's the Peter Parker Spider-Man, and basically it's like isn't a virus that's like wiped out humanity, or is it wiped out just the heroes? Because I can't remember how they did that.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't. I don't want to. I don't want to say it wrong, and then have one of your audience members like, "Oh, you guys don't know anything about."
What are you talking about on that show over there? It's crap. Leave it up to the internet people. They just ruin everything, don't they? Not the hardcore fans of the show. I love you guys, so we're good. We're all good. But yeah, it makes me wonder how deep they're going to dive on this. The cool thing about this series is they're really only hindered by the time it takes to produce the animation.
Right.
I mean, obviously recording the voices, yes, directing it, yes, mixing it, I got it. But it's not like being on location and spending millions of dollars on special effects, and it's not like, well, you got to have the actor here on the plane at this time, and you got to have everyone over here at this time, and no, it's just they're really only hindered by the amount of time it takes to produce an episode and get it to the streaming service because man, they've got so much stuff they can do. I mean, even if they didn't do or take inspiration from any of the What If books, there's a whole bunch of stuff they could do if they were creative enough, and I'm sure they are. Um, all it takes is just a little brainstorming. You come up with all kinds of stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of doing animated stuff on their streaming platform and then using all of the cast of the movies that they had over the years is a great idea. 'Cause, I mean, you still have all these guys on contract anyway, so um, you can use them. And I mean, you're already doing like exclusive content for the streaming platform anyway. But just the idea that you can bring these guys in and you don't have to film, you could just bring them in and record for a few hours and then uh, have the animators knock it out. It's a great idea.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm watching the trailer again, and I'm back to Stark and Strange. They're both so one is dressed as the Sorcerer Supreme, and he's using the ring, and he's got the gray on the side. So I assume that's Strange. The guy that's in the sky fighting him, I assume maybe is Tony. But buddy, he's a dark version. Like you can tell, the power come from his hands is like red and yellow, and he looks like the dark side, man. So there may be a little bit more to this than what we originally thought.
Yeah, I mean,
But
that's an interesting idea in itself because Tony is such a practical guy, and he's a quote unquote realist. He's a futurist, so the idea of getting him to buy into mystical is an interesting idea.
yeah, if Tony can't touch it, feel it, taste it, invent it, yeah, he's a very hands-on guy, right? He describes himself as a tinker, as a mechanic, and which is so great because it boils the character down to its complete essence, which is billionaire, yeah, rich, spoiled, sure, whatever, excitement, yeah, that's great. But like, at his heart, he's a mechanic. That's what he does. He tinkers and let's take this apart and see what makes it work and try to put it back together. But this time, put it back together in a better way.
Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you.
So yeah, you're right. Trying to convince him of the mystical arts. And dude, you could, and I'm sure they've done this, take the entire episode and base it around the dichotomy between Robert Downey and Benedict Cumberbatch from the film, because their chemistry on screen was freaking perfect. Like oil and water, man. That's enough right there for a whole show, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I mean, they touch on it a bit in the movies and just how afraid Tony is once he has to, deal with the fact that, no, these are things that I don't believe are real. Like, this is aliens. This is stuff that is beyond what regular people would believe in. And him having, traumatic stress disorder from that.
Yeah, having visions and nightmares of what he saw when he went up through that hole. Yeah, that's insane, dude. And it's another example of the people at Marvel doing their level best to connect everything. You talked about way early in this episode about connecting everything. There's connections there. It doesn't mean you're going to see them today. You could see them 10 years from now, but the connection will be there, and they could always go to it. And as long as the idea behind it is solid, you could always capitalize on it and spin something off on its own, which is obviously what they've done here. I think this whole trailer looks great. And the only fault I find is it's not freaking long enough because I want to see a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they probably were like, yeah, we gave you guys plenty. I mean, like you said earlier, the what if of if Spider-Man joined the Fantastic Four, because when they showed that thing for Fantastic Four, I immediately was like, okay, we've got to get Spider-Man in Fantastic Four movies, because I don't know about you, but to me, Spider-Man is more important to Fantastic Four's mythos than the Avengers mythos, because that's where he debuted. He debuted in a Fantastic Four comic, and like their relationship is more familiar than anything in Avengers, in my opinion.
So it's Amazing Fantasy number 15 was Spider-Man's first appearance. But he spent a lot of time in the Fantastic Four book. So here's the question for you. How do you bring, and it's kind of off topic, sort of, how do you bring him in live action? Is Dr. Reed Richards his connection because he's a professor at a university, or is it Johnny Storm because he's more Peter's age? How do you bring him in?
That's interesting because, of course, Johnny is in a lot of ways his best friend in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, they've kind of tied a lot of guys and make somebody his best friend. Like sometimes Harry's his best friend. Sometimes they'll throw in Bobby Drake. He's his best friend. Sometimes Johnny Storm's his best friend. But they are really good friends. But you already have kind of a way because his school is like a school for special people. Like it's a charter school, but it's like a science school. You can always have like a field trip to the Baxter Building.
I like that. Yeah. So there's two trains of thoughts here when it comes to bringing the FF into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One thing is, well, more than likely how this is going to happen is in the new Doctor Strange flick, that it's the multiverse of madness, right? So this is how all these characters, including the X-Men, maybe even Hugh Jackman at some point, we don't know yet, this is how they're all going to be introduced. So there's two mindsets. One is that, and the other one is, well, no, they've always been there. They just didn't talk about them in the movies. I don't know how much of that, this part two, makes sense because in the big fights against Thanos, why wouldn't the Fantastic Four have been on deck for that? Why wouldn't they have been affected? Why wouldn't they have, you know what I mean? So does the first explanation sound a lot more credible than the second?
Yeah. Well, I could buy into the idea that they haven't been around all this time and that there was one big cosmic thing that changed it. And you could possibly make the snap the thing that changed everything. Um, and that's an interesting way to go about it. I don't know when they plan to introduce them. I mean, you could introduce them in the quantum verse stuff that they're doing in Ant Man.
Ooh.
There's places you can go with this. I don't know.
And really, that would, because you think of the brainy types in the MCU, which we know, Tony Stark character is no longer with us. Spoiler alert, kids. Unfortunately, Downey's no longer part of the equation. You could say that Banner's still there, but Banner's now the Hulk because it's 5 years after Endgame, or excuse me, after the snap. So technically, for the MCU, right now, today, it's 2025. Depending on when this episode's released, folks, just so you know, we don't know when we're going to release it. So wherever you're at right now, add 5 years to it. So they're 5 years ahead of time, and Banner and the Hulk are one and the same, and he doesn't change back. So he's still one of the smartest guys around. But I guess Banner now has taken the moniker, the title of smartest guy in the MCU. But that is until Reed Richards shows up, right? Because this guy is a freaking next level genius.
I think technically Shuri is the smartest person in the MCU at the moment.
I'll go for that.
Because I mean, in Endgame, when they're all trying to figure out what to do with Vision, she's just kind of like, "Why didn't you guys just do this?" And she just kind of like outsmarts everybody in the room.
Honestly, I'd forgotten about that bit. You're right. And I still maintain that she should just be Black Panther. That's a different conversation for a different day. But part of me says recast it because as much as I love Chadwick Boseman and I love that guy so much, I just wonder if you could ask him right now, hey, what would you want to see happen? He'd say, look, this character's great. Why are you going to stop it? Don't stop it now. I mean,
Yeah,
it's one of those things where like, well, Tom, you don't know what they would say. I get it. I totally get it. But he loved the character. It seems like it would do more justice and more respect to him by continuing it with someone who would be honored to take the role. That's just my input.
yeah. I feel like the identity of Black Panther is bigger than anybody who plays it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like the mantle means more to pop culture at the moment than it does, regardless of who plays it. And I think Chadwick will understand that, but I also understand that it's so soon. I mean, it hasn't
It
been
is.
even a year since he passed away, and I understand that it feels crummy to talk about replacing him in these circles, and I get that.
Yeah, it's funny because within 24 hours of him passing, they were already talking about it.
Yes,
Not they meaning Marvel, but some
yeah,
idiot fans.
yeah, and so I understand. I understand the creators behind this being like, it shouldn't be back to business as usual. Like this is a man, and he had an impact on our cast. He had an impact on our production, and we can't just go on. And I understand that. So maybe they recast him later, but I can understand going. Oh, we have a movie to make that needs to be made in 2 years. I'm not ready to recast him yet.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't. Yeah, I think when the time is right, it should happen. But yeah, I'm with you. I think maybe it is too soon. And they're moving on. They're going to move on with part two regardless. And the word is that they're not going to recast, and the entire movie is just going to be about the ensemble cast from part one. And
Yeah,
I mean, I'm okay with that. I guess. To me, it would feel more like God. He's not here. He's just not here. This is not. This sucks. It's not the same movie. Where's he at? This is. I don't know. I wonder if the focus would be too much on this entire movie is a eulogy. Not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, but that's kind of not the spirit of the first film at all. The spirit is hope, and it's
yeah.
giving back in the future and opening up and trying to bring people in and being a family. And I don't know. It definitely will have a different vibe for sure.
Yeah, it's a real tough situation. Like I feel like I read earlier this week that he was already in talks to sign on to do Black Panther 3, and They had
Oh,
already made plans, and it's just a real sad situation. And so I understand having hopes and wanting to do them with him, and then that not being the case anymore. Um, I mean, at least we got him to do like the voice for the What If show. I believe that's the last thing he did for the company.
I think you're
Um,
right.
but yeah, it's just a sad situation.
There's no good answer here, I'm afraid. I wish there was, but I don't know that there ever will be. Yeah, that's a tough one, but yeah, just to be able to enjoy his voice again and to enjoy him in this character, at least somewhat of this character. And I have to think this was a blast for him to do. Just the idea of T'Challa becoming Star Lord, man, that may be the one I'm the most anxious to see. The Peggy Carter one's going to be good, but I think I'm the most anxious to see T'Challa as Star Lord because it, and plus I don't know that he will be the pushover that Quill was, where it's like, where Quill's kind of Yondu could get the better of him and get in his face and intimidate him, and I don't know that T'Challa's going to be having that. Of course, this is not the T'Challa who was trained and fought, and yeah, it will be different, man, for sure. It's going to be a much different thing, no doubt about it.
Yeah, but I mean, this is still a T'Challa that comes from royalty. He still knows his importance in the world, whether he has grown into it or not. He's still not Quill, and Quill is kind of lost when he's taken.
Very true. Just endured the death of his mother, so he's very vulnerable at that point. Yeah, good point. Yeah, it's going to be good, man. I'm excited to see that one. What if the Thing and the Beast continued to mutate? I don't know that I read that, but man, that sounds fun. Like, what did they get to? Like, what the heck happened next? The Beast is 9 feet tall and 2,000 pounds, big as a SUV, and I mean, I just wonder how insane did that get? Just the title of that sounds fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's continued to evolve in the comic over the years now. Like he's turned in like he looks cat-like in some comics, and then
Very true.
now more ape-like again. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've always thought that the idea of Beast is just so interesting. Just a guy that already had a mutation, and then he decided he wanted to tinker with it, and then it became even more of a mutation. Um, yeah, when you talk about guys that are kind of missing in the MCU, when you have big brains in the room, Beast is definitely one of them.
Oh, good call. And it's funny that that could be another way in for these characters into the MCU is that you could say, well, Doctor Strange has been on this side and he's been looking at it, and Shuri had her hand in it, and Banner had his hand in it, and we all kind of knew something was going on. Then they could come in and say, yeah, we kind of knew too where we were. We knew Hank McCoy was on it. Professor X was on it. We knew something was wrong. Something was, Dr. Reed Richards was in on it. We knew something was going on, and now we're all here and they're all shaking hands. That would be cool, man. I'm looking forward to that. I mean, if anybody
Yeah,
can get it right, it's the guys running the MCU. I mean, is third time the charm for the Fantastic Four? I gotta be honest with you. I didn't hate the original movie. I did not hate it. I wasn't crazy about part two, even though I love Silver Surfer. I love that character. I thought he looked phenomenal. I wasn't crazy about the film, but I did not hate that first movie at all. I mean,
yeah, I
it's
thought
third.
the first one was all right.
I did too. Yeah, I thought it was cast well too. And if you're going to do a practical effects on the Thing, what else can you do except put Michael Chiklis in a rubber suit? I mean, I thought he looked good.
I thought he looked good for what they did.
Yeah.
I think he looked a little stiff, but we're still dealing with rubber suits, and I understood that. But I thought for what they did, he looked good. I thought Michael Chiklis was great in the role. I thought they cast a great Reed Richards. I thought Chris Evans was a great Johnny Storm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like Jessica Alba was great for what we got. I might be overstating it when I say great, but I thought she was good for what we got. Man, I don't want to turn this into a conversation about the next Fantastic Four movie they made, but I felt like the cast they had was really really good.
Mm.
I thought they had a great I thought they had a great cast with this thing, and then they just kind of screwed the pooch with it. I don't know what happened with this thing. It like the first maybe 30 minutes of it where it looked like they were clearly doing the Ultimate Fantastic Four stuff was good, and then it
Mm.
just jumped off a cliff.
Is it one of those situations where it's like, why did this have to be Fantastic Four? Couldn't this have just been another movie? I mean, would it have worked then, maybe?
Uh, I'm not sure. It almost felt like the director went into it and he wanted to make like this sci-fi movie, and he wanted to do all of these elements from Fantastic Four. And then someone from Fox said, "No, but you've got to have all the superhero stuff in there. You got to do like the final fight and all this other stuff." And that's when it started changing. But
Right.
like all of the stuff when they were just doing like the sci-fi stuff and trying to open the portal, and because to me the Fantastic Four works best when they are explorers, when they're scientists. Like, because technically they're not superheroes. They're like they're scientists. They're they're and they're questioning things. They're not, are their idea isn't to go and punch something. So, all of that stuff works to me, but then, once you bring Doom in and you have to do all of the superhero-y stuff, I feel like that's where people stumble. And I feel like that's what happened with this movie.
And Josh Trank, the director, knew. He knew through the whole film. They said he was impossible to talk to. He'd isolate himself from the cast. He felt like the whole world was out to get him. The studio was out to get him. And there were stories about how his behavior was and how he acted toward the cast and all this other stuff. And I'm like,
Was it Josh Trank? I think Josh Trank directed the first movies. What was the guy's name that directed the second movies? Was it
he directed the 2015 for sure.
Josh Trank did?
Yeah. Now, I don't know who directed the original.
Josh Trank directed the originals.
Let me see here.
I could be wrong.
Oh.
Nope, I'm wrong. I'm sorry. Josh Trank. You're right. It's that's my man's name.
Tim Story.
Sorry, there you go.
Yeah. I don't know how I forgot that. Because I knew that for the longest time. I could tell you that off the top of my head, and I just forgot it.
But I mean, you had some good names attached to this movie that Josh Trank directed. And it was like you had Matthew Vaughn, and Matthew Vaughn has done other good things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeesh, did this movie turn into a train wreck.
So
Holy cow.
there's an idea out there, and it's been opinion shared by many fans. I'm gonna get your take on it. Is The Incredibles the best Fantastic Four film ever made? Because
Yes
it kind of
and no.
feels that way.
Yes and no, because I feel like The Incredibles gets the family element to the Fantastic Four right.
Mhm.
But it doesn't touch on any of the scientist stuff. It doesn't touch on any of the explorer stuff. And I feel like those are integral to what makes the Fantastic Four interesting. Now, when you're talking about just a family of superheroes, Incredibles does it better than any mainstream movie. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they nailed it. And again, I'm not crazy about the sequel. The part 2 to me felt like a rehash of part 1. It was the same idea, the same theme, except with the other parent. And I'm like, I can't believe they're doing this for part 2. Like, it's an animated film, and I'm sitting there critiquing it in the theater, but I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I can't believe this is what we're doing with part 2. Like, I don't know. It just felt like they could have went a much better direction, but
Yeah, I feel like you wouldn't have judged it as harshly if we didn't wait so long for it, because we
maybe
waited what,
so.
like years for it.
Oh yeah, it took a while.
So I think if they had come like back to back with this thing, because I felt like Incredibles 2 should have been made years ago. Um, but yeah, I enjoy Incredibles, but like there are special elements to Reed and Sue's dynamic that are different. Um, that I feel like haven't been done well. Like, I mean, you can make the case that the Tim Story movies, they did as good as they could in the first movie. But yeah, I still feel like we haven't had a great Fantastic Four movie yet. We've had a serviceable one, but we haven't had a great one yet.
Serviceable is a good word. I like that. It's like a backhanded compliment, maybe. Well, this is serviceable. This will do in a pinch, I suppose.
Yeah, I enjoyed it for what it was. I didn't like that version of Doctor Doom. I do like the actor that played Doctor Doom in that movie, but
Yeah.
I did care for like the end result.
That was Julian McMahon from Nip Tuck, and if you ever watch Nip Tuck on FX, that's a messed up show.
Yes, Nip Tucked and Charmed. That's where I was from.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Um, but yeah, so I do like the actor that played him. I didn't really care for him, being mutated and stuff like that. Like my version of Doom, I still want him to be like a Latverian, and I want him to be like, like authoritarian, dictatorish. Like I want him to be like there's Doom is one of my favorite villains, so I'm gonna critique Doom harder than I would critique other characters.
And from that perspective, you could introduce the Fantastic Four in terms of Doom and Latveria. You could just say, well, Latveria is this country. Kind of like the way they did with Wakanda. They just didn't mention Wakanda in the beginning. And then suddenly, Wakanda is this nation over here, but it's pretty poor. You could just always say Latveria has always been there. They just haven't talked about it. It hasn't made any noise. Well, there's this guy and he's a dictator. We don't know much about him. His name's Victor Von Doom. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
crazy name. We don't know what that means. And then the heroes somehow get sent there. They cross paths with someone from that country. Next thing you know, you see the full Victor Von Doom in the suit and everything. That'd be crazy.
yeah. I mean, they kind of did the same thing with Sokovia. Like they just
Yeah.
kind of brought Sokovia into the equation later.
Makes you wonder if it had been the Latvian Accords instead of the Sokovia Accords. Of course, at that time they couldn't do anything because was it Paramount still had the rights to the Fantastic Four, so they couldn't touch them.
Yeah.
Or not
Um.
Paramount, Fox. Excuse me.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be. Yeah. I think Doom. Man. Yeah. Once you bring Doom into the MCU, it's a shame you don't get Tony, playing off Doom at any point ever. That's kind of a shame. With that. But yeah, I mean, just the idea of Doom on screen again is just like super exciting.
Tony Stark makes everything better. I don't, Downey just made everything better. I get why they killed him. I'm not lamenting it. I understand, and it did make sense for his character. It brought his character full circle. I can't dispute any of those arguments. But man, I miss the guy already. And MCU is not the same without him. I don't even know what to compare it to. We've never seen a situation like this where you've had a single entity build an entire universe. You can't say Friday the 13th. That wasn't a universe of characters. That was one guy. I mean, and then references to other people along the way. But I don't know who else I compare it to. What other property I compare it to? We have an interconnected, interlinked, universe of characters that could pop up anytime in any given film and have an impact. I mean, he's missed basically everywhere because every character he shared screen time with, he made it better. It's like
Yeah.
it's crazy. He's like the best pro wrestler you've ever seen because everybody shares the ring with. He makes them better. It's good
Yeah.
stuff, man. Yeah, it's not the same. And I would have imagined that he would have had crazy. And he can still be a part of this, which is cool. He could still be a part of the What If series, and that would be sort of a way of keeping Tony around and bringing him back to life, so to speak. And I'm down with that. I think that's pretty cool. So having him on board's awesome. I'm looking forward to this. I've got 9 long boxes tucked in my closet, and it turns out all my What If books are in box number 6 on the floor in the back. Because the goal was, I'm going to dig that sucker out. It's going to take a little bit more to dig that out than I anticipated. So, but now I've got reason to, because now it's just talking about this stuff makes me want to go read these books again. So, I kind of tease the idea of doing this, and I can't tell you that I've brainstormed like crazy, but do you have any cool, like, what ifs? Like, if you were behind an idea, any what ifs that you'd like to see happen in particular?
What if is that tied to the movies or
Oh
it
man,
has?
it can be all you, dude, all you. What do you think? Anything that, what if so and so joined the whoever? What if so and so killed the whoever? I mean, that'd be interesting.
I'm sure like a lot of people would like to see the what if of what if what if Quill didn't ruin the plan and they took the gauntlet off of Thanos?
Yes.
And what would have happened? Because I'm of the opinion they still lose. Um, it takes longer for them to lose. But like I feel like a lot of people would be interested in that. What if they actually got the gauntlet off and they captured Thanos and they brought him back to Earth or wherever they were going to try to um, do with him? Um, oh, there's so many other ones.
That's a great one because then the entire movie becomes it's only a matter of time till he breaks out of the cell, and if he does, you know he's coming for the gauntlet. So we're either going to have to put it into space, try to destroy it, or try to yeah. How do we move forward? Yeah, dude. That's a great idea.
Yeah. I think another one, of course, would be like, what if T'Chaka did not kill his brother and Chaku like grew up in Wakanda? Like, does he still become Killmonger? What
Mm.
what happens with those characters?
What if he had killed T'Chaka?
Yeah, that's interesting too.
Well, that's a good one. And then it becomes T'Challa is the other kid whose father was murdered, and then maybe Killmonger grows up, maybe not in the coveted on the coveted throne or whatever, but he doesn't know that loss that T'Challa knows, so it'd be a completely different Black Panther character.
Uh, and definitely, I would say another one. If what if Hawkeye died instead of Quicksilver? Because I think like one of the interesting things we've watched happen since Age of Ultron is watching the progression of Wanda's character and watched her kind of descent into kind of madness almost. Like it hasn't
Yeah,
happened quite yet, but it's happening.
yeah.
Um, and you have to wonder, like, that's definitely would be different if Pietro was still alive.
I can see that. That makes perfect sense. You would think that she wouldn't be there. That she wouldn't like you said, descending into madness. And we'll see that in WandaVision. I can't wait for that either.
Yeah.
What if this goes back to the comics, obviously, but we get that infamous scene, which is a massive callback to the books, which caused such an uproar in the industry when he's on board the elevator and he tells him he's going to be taking the scepter and he whispers to him, "Hail Hydra." So what if Steve Rogers had joined Hydra? What if Steve Rogers had been Hydra all along? So
So, did you read that comic, by the way? I think it's Secret Empire, where
I
he's
could not bring myself to do it. Didn't they explain it away in the end with some BS excuse?
so I don't remember if I finished it all the way, but I thought the idea of it was interesting. But it's just such a thing that people are just like, no, he cannot be on the other side. He's like he's our idea of pure and good. He cannot be corrupted. Um, but I just think the idea of him being corrupted is so interesting because in my mind, anybody can be corrupted. Like it just doesn't, nobody is infallible. Especially we're in a world where mind control and all these other things exist.
Right.
Um, but man, I just the idea of them having Steve as like a sleeper cell all that time is really interesting. Um,
That's crazy. I never
um,
picked it up, man. The backlash online was just insane.
it was. But I don't think people realized the whole idea behind it was to um was to make Sam the Captain America at the time. And like Sam's book was everything that people were like, "Oh, I don't want a cap that doesn't stand for truth and justice." But it's like, but you have one. Sam does. Like you the whole point is Sam is the hero of this story, and you know you're supposed to root for Sam. And I don't think a lot of people got that, but you know, um, man, like yeah, I mean, when you go back to the comics, like there's interesting stuff like what if hmm what if Spider-Man had joined the Avengers earlier, because his thing in the books was he was always a loner. He was never
Mhm.
what we know in the movies, that he wanted to be an Avenger earlier. He kind of didn't want to join up. He kind of wanted to continue to do his own thing. Um
Yeah, what if he
and
accepted Tony's invitation at the end of Homecoming?
right. Yeah, that's interesting too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other movie things.
There's so much stuff to play with, man. I'm sure they see that too.
Yeah, there's tons of stuff to go back to. Yeah, I mean, if you go all the way back to um, the first Iron Man movie,
Mm-hmm.
and what if what if he listened to Rhodes at the beginning and Rhodes rode with him? Does he ever become Iron Man? Does he ever get captured? Like that's an interesting idea in itself too.
Right, right. Is it one of those things that happen? Like I think one of the reasons why the books were so dark on a lot of the endings was that this was not supposed to happen, and it reminds me of 11/22/63, the Stephen King book about the Kennedy assassination, where the guy travels back in time and he attempts to stop, and he does. When he comes back to the present, it's chaos. The whole world has fallen apart. I mean, like the earth itself has come unglued. And the idea is time is supposed to happen the way it's supposed to happen. And if you screw with that, then everything changes. And that idea of, well, this story was not supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen like this, which is why you're not getting your happy ending. All is
Yes,
not well. It's not happily ever after because we didn't get what was supposed to happen. So I think that's a lot of the allure of these books and this idea is that you're not going to get a perfect ending because it's not what was supposed to happen. We're looking at what could have happened. So these ideas that we're talking about, like this new stuff here that we're talking about, I mean, I'm looking at how it could end. The bit that you just said about Spider-Man and all that. I mean, I don't know how it could end. Like, uh, I think it would still have a bad ending, especially with Rhodes and Stark. What if Rhodes gets killed while they're over there?
yes, that's what
You
I
know,
thought. Like if he went with him, he could have easily gotten killed by the Ten Rings organization, and there would be no War Machine. There'd be no.
right?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's clearly like room for what ifs with the decimation. Like, what if the snap kills other people instead? Like the people that get killed in the decimation makes Infinity Wars a different movie.
Mm-hmm.
So if the snap happens and Steve dies instead of Bucky, for example, you don't have Steve to lead them.
Right.
Do they
Yeah.
lose?
What? Yeah. What if you're left with the B team instead of the A team?
Yeah, like if you're left with Sam and Bucky instead of Steve when you come back, because that's a big part of Infinity War, and I mean, to me, whenever we have this like conjecture online where people are like, oh, if Star Lord had just stuck to the plan, they wouldn't have lost. I'm of the belief they still would have lost because the reason they lost is because nobody would wanted to work together. And I've gotten into this debate several times. The thing that regardless if Star Lord stuck to the mission or not, they lose because Tony led them into a suicide mission. If he had just taken the gem back home and have teamed up with Steve and called everybody together in the first place, they wouldn't have lost because remember at the end of Infinity War they won because they won together like Steve told him in the first place.
Right.
And that's why they lost. They didn't lose because of one person's actions. They lost because everybody didn't just come together like they should have.
So, I mean, the moral of the story is that Steve was right through the whole thing, through Civil War, through all of it. He was right. If they only listened to him, and then Tony tries to justify it by saying, I said we should put a suit of armor around the world, and you said that it would be okay that you'd be there and we'd work together, and you weren't there. And I'm thinking that's kind of not what happened. I mean,
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many things to look at in Infinity Wars when you look at how full circle it was. The thing that Steve told Tony from the very beginning is you're not a hero because you wouldn't jump on a grenade. And in the end, his death matters because that's exactly what he did, is he jumped on
yes,
it for everyone. And so those are all those things that Steve was right about so many things, but Tony was also right about things. And
mhm.
they made each other better characters. And so having Steve off the table in an Infinity War, or if Thanos had killed Tony when he stabbed him, like Tony not being on the table, they lose. And I think Strange knew that.
Yeah, it's funny how, and I kind of left off Strange in terms of the smartest people in the MCU. I mean, maybe not smart in terms of extreme intelligence, but smart because of what he can see that the rest of us can't.
Yeah, and that's another Star Lord thing because people are just so dump on Star Lord thing. I think Strange always knew that Star Lord was going to ruin the plan. I think he had already seen it. So I don't. I just don't think it matters. I think whether he ruined the plan or not, they were going to lose.
That's a good point. It makes sense too. Um, well, like we said, man, there's so many different ways. Just talking to you here at the end of the show is just we're coming up with different takes and stuff. Just imagine what the creators in these rooms are talking about, who are actually working on this stuff. I mean, it's helps to be a fan, and I've always felt like that they've had the right mix of people behind the scenes for the most part, who either grew up as fans or who appreciate the genre to the point of getting it. There's a difference between I read this book or I get this book, like I get it. Like the first time I read the first issue of Kick Ass
Yes.
was one of the most exciting comics I had read in years. That panel, that page where he was talking about, I cost my father his job and I did all this stuff to him and it's my fault and I've got all this guilt. And the very next page is a splash page of him in that suit again. Dude, I howled. I out loud reading that book. I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever because it's just that idea of comics. Again, I got it. I totally got that. So for these creators, oh, I read the book in preparation for the movie. Yeah, you read it. Did you get it? Did you get it? Do you get what's going on? So I think that's where Marvel has a leg up, not just on DC, but on any other sci-fi / comic entity that wants to start universe building. Their creators seem to get it, man.
What man? My biggest what I think our biggest what if in the real world is what if Zack Snyder did not helm the Snyderverse?
Oh man.
Where would the Justice League franchise be right now if it was not helmed by Zack Snyder? Um, and there's other real life TV verse things where I don't have to be shady towards DC. What if Disney Plus existed before the Marvel TV shows got pitched to Netflix?
Ooh,
Probably would be in season 4 of Daredevil right now.
I agree. And so rewind to DC because it's intriguing because we've done the Justice League, but I don't know how far I don't know that we touched on this. If not Zack Snyder, then who?
Oh man,
Who would have made that thing work?
that's a great question. I feel like they wanted Christopher Nolan to helm it because
Mhm.
he fits what they are doing in making everything grounded. And I feel like they went with the next best thing of having him produce them and then bringing in Zack Snyder to direct them. Um, but I just don't think Christopher Nolan was interested in doing that. I don't think he was that interested in doing like all the universe building stuff that they wanted him to do.
Right, I agree with that.
But I definitely think that's who they wanted. Um, as far as who could have made it work, that's that's really tough. Because it takes an interesting mind to just come in and helm these things, and I would say because when you look at what the MCU has done, of course they had Joss Whedon come in and do the first two Avengers movies, and then you had other guys come in and do the Avengers movies after that. But the common denominator is Feige, and I feel like
Yes.
that's the bigger problem with DC and Warner Brothers. Is Warner Brothers hasn't given someone the vision like Feige does to just go, this is what we want to do. We'll plug in directors here. We don't have to have the director around the entire universe, but this is what our plan is. This is where we're going into the future, and we'll bring in directors that want to work along those lines.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's Vince McMahon, for as much grief as he catches, and rightfully so, in my humble estimation. That's often been said of other companies who've tried to compete with Vince in the past, like Impact Wrestling, back in the day when they really were taking a shot at it. I guess they didn't have
They didn't have a Vince McMahon behind the scenes saying yes or no. They didn't have a boss like that. They didn't have someone who was a single voice bringing everything together for a common goal. They didn't have that. So, yeah, I think you're 100% right. I mean, DC Universe has never had. I mean, they've got Jim Lee now, I think, has taken over where Jeff Johns was. But, I mean, I love Jim Lee. He's a great comic artist, and he's a good writer. But I don't know if what is he after that? Is he a big picture guy? Can he see? I see 10 years down the road. I see what this could be in 10 years, not what it is today, what it could be in 10 years. Like, they need a visionary. It's someone huge. And
Like if you get Jeff John and you get you get Jim Lee in, they're still comic guys. Like Feige's not a comic guy. Like he
right,
understands the source material, but at the end of the day, he is a producer. And I
right,
feel like he needed someone on their movie side that understood both sides and wanted to produce good movies. Like because if you have somebody that wants to just do the comic stuff right, like they're only looking at it what their visions of what the comics are. They're not looking at their vision of what good movies would make.
right. I agree with that. And it'll be interesting to see what that company does moving forward. The good news for Marvel fans is that this company is they're at no small source for talent. They've got a amount of talent. They've got a lot of good people working behind the scenes to bring this stuff to life, to keep bringing the MCU, making the MCU happen. Even during the era that we live in now, the Disney Plus streaming service is a great thing for this company. I'm very glad it exists. I watch a lot of Disney Plus, and there's really good stuff on there and good stuff to come. And the What If series is one of my top picks. I will be absolutely stunned if I don't fall in love with this. There's nothing that I've seen so far that leads me to believe that this is going to be a dud in any way, shape, or form. So, lots to talk about here. The books, the show, everything in between. The possibilities are endless. I'm sure you agree with that. And a lot of cool places to see where they're going to take this. So, what's your last word on the What If series?
Man, sky's the limit at this point, man. I mean, just what they can do with this thing is just infinite.
I agree, and it's going to be fun to see what happens. I'm sure it's going to be a great ride. I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be some very cool stories to be told that will tide us over until the films kick back into full force, and hopefully that day will come sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, we'll have Disney Plus, all the great shows that I'm sure we'll be podcasting about as they happen. That'll be fun too, and a never-ending well of material for us to tap into anytime we need to do a show. So that's a very good thing for the 6M for sure. And that is Marvel's What If. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.